Hello and welcome to or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for stopping by, and if you are a recurring viewer or a subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support of my channel. I really appreciate you all being here today. As of filming, it is Sunday, April 23rd, which means it is time for another weekend reading update. So I thought that I would just sort of briefly share the books that I finished last week, the books that I'm currently reading now, and then my reading plans moving into next week. So last week was a fairly good reading week for me. I finished one book and I made decent progress in two others, one audio, one physical print and paper book. I like to listen to books when I am driving in the car or when I'm at work, when I can't have a physical book in front of me. So I like to have an audiobook and a physical book / ebook going simultaneously. That way, I sort of, whatever environment I'm in, I can always be making some sort of progress on a book. So I guess starting off with what I finished last week, the book that I finished was Patrick O'Brian's Master and Commander. And this is book one in the Jack Aubrey series, which is a series of, I think it's maybe 20 or 21 books, so quite a long lineup. And this is about Jack Aubrey, a British naval officer / commander during the Napoleonic Wars, and it is absolutely fantastic. So I am currently reading the second book in the series, Post Captain, but this was my first time reading any sort of Napoleonic Age of Sail novel. I have read very little even about the Napoleonic Wars in general. I believe I've only read one biography of Napoleon himself, and I think only one book about the Battle of Waterloo, and that's been it. So basically a completely blank slate for me. I've been really fascinated by maritime history, by naval history. In March, I read Moby Dick for the first time, and that really piqued my interest into sailing and whaling primarily for a while there, and then sort of shifted that perspective away from the sort of commercial aspect of sailing into the naval aspect of sailing. And then I wanted a novel. I was reading a lot of nonfiction, and I wanted a novelization of this time period, and Master and Commander was the sort of obvious first choice that was recommended to me that I picked up with. And it has been, it was absolutely fantastic. So this one, I jointly read it in this print form and in an ebook form and listened to it on audio. So I had three different mediums that I took in this book with. And the audiobook that I had was narrated by a narrator named Patrick Tull, and he did an absolutely fantastic job. And I think that audiobook was put out by Recorded Books. So if you want an audiobook for this one, I would highly recommend checking out Recorded Books version narrated by Patrick Tull. He did a fantastic job. As far as the actual flow of the story goes and the writing itself, it actually felt very reminiscent to me of sort of a Victorian or even a Regency period British novel. It's very sort of slowly laid out. There's not a whole lot of intense action scenes. There are certainly action scenes and build-ups to those scenes, but it's not sort of swashbuckly the entire way through. There are a lot of periods of just dialogue and conversation, setting the scene, explaining the history of things, discussing aspects of sailing, aspects of the ship itself, things that I found really, really enjoyable, sort of just for getting bits and pieces of information. Also, there is quite a large cast. Of course, it is a very large frigate, I guess would be the right word. So there are lots of men, lots of sailors and officers on board. So we have a lot of dialogue between a lot of characters, which was really fun. Very reminiscent of an ensemble cast. We definitely do have our main characters. We have Jack Aubrey and Stephen Maturin, the doctor, his close friend. And so we have sort of our key core group of characters, but there are quite a lot of characters that appear throughout this book that made it really enjoyable. So this one is the one book that I finished last week. And it looks, this edition makes it look very short, but it's a little over 400 pages. So it's actually quite a long read, at least for me. So this was my one completed book from last week. Then moving on to I guess there's one more that I finished last week, and that is Burton Raffel's translation of Beowulf for my Beowulf in April read along that I'm doing with Steve Donahue and David Wiley. So technically, Burton Raffel's translation was supposed to be the translation for last week. I got a little bit behind on my personal reading for this read along, and so I am going to be putting out my video for Burton Raffel's translation this weekend, and then next week, hopefully midweek, I'll be putting out my Seamus Heaney translation video, which is supposed to be for this weekend. But if you are following along with our read along and following along particularly with Steve Donahue's channel, he put out an excellent video for the Burton Raffel translation last weekend, which was very informative. I would highly recommend watching that if you have not already. And then I'm sure either this weekend or in a couple of days, he'll be putting out his video for Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf, which I will also go ahead and highly recommend it, even though I have not seen it yet, because I'm sure it's going to be fantastic and chock full of fantastic information. So I'll hopefully have my Seamus Heaney video out sometime next week, but this is another finished read from last week. It's a little bit longer than the Michael Alexander translation put out by Penguin Classics. I believe that one was sat right around 100 pages, and this one is right around 130 or 40 pages or so. So it's a little bit longer. It took me a little longer. But overall, this is my favorite translation out of the three that I have read so far. I have a feeling that title is going to be snagged by the Seamus Heaney translation just from the very little bit that I've heard about it. But for right now, as it stands, Burton Raffel's translation of Beowulf is my current favorite from the three that we have read so far. Really, the main reason for that is it felt the most lively and the most vivid out of the last three translations. It pulled me in the most, and I felt that the way in which Burton Raffel translated it, it really came across as a living, breathing story, and not just sort of a resuscitation of an old oral tradition, but really something that has its own legs and stands on its own and is a living, breathing story. It felt very current. It did not feel dusty and old at all, which was really enjoyable. So those are the two books that I read last week. And then moving on to what I am currently reading. Like I said a couple minutes ago, I'm currently reading Post Captain by Patrick O'Brien. This is book 2 in the Jack Aubrey series, and I am about halfway through this one, and I am really enjoying it. The first half of this book takes place off of any ship whatsoever, and it's actually very reminiscent, at least to me, of Austen's writing in the dialogue, in the conversation, in the descriptors, but then also in the set pieces and themes themselves. So I'm not going to talk about this too much because I want to talk about this one when I am done reading it. But I did just want to share, it does feel very sort of Jane Austen at the very beginning, at least for the first half of the novel. We've now entered back onto the ocean for the second half of the novel, so it's returning very much to the roots of Master and Commander, and it's been an absolute joy so far. Then, keeping in with the theme of Napoleonic Age of Sail, I started Edgar Vincent's Nelson, Love and Fame, the biography of Lord Horatio Nelson, who sort of became a hero at the Battle of Trafalgar, where he was killed in an engagement with the French during the Napoleonic War. So this fits very well with Master and Commander, and really what turned me on to wanting to read a Nelson biography really was all of the references to Nelson in Master and Commander, actually, as well as in Post Captain. He's referred to quite a bit, and I realized that the only thing that I knew about him was that he died at the Battle of Trafalgar. I didn't know anything else about him. And so I thought I would remedy that. I happened to have this biography sitting on my bookshelf, and so it was sort of a natural, one thing led to another, and I decided to start reading this one. I'm about 100 pages in, I think maybe exactly 100 pages in. So the first little part, a lot of information about his childhood, which really wasn't very long, as he became a seaman essentially at the age of 15. So he didn't really have a whole lot of time to be a child, and that gave him quite a long time to be within his career, which obviously set up certain advantages for him. So this has been great, and this will definitely go on through into next week and maybe even the week after. I think it's sitting right around 600 pages, which is quite lengthy. So I will be giving updates on this one as I read more and more of it, but I do think that I will be having this one going at least for another week, if not 2 weeks. Then I'm continuing on with Borges for Classics and Company. This is the Andrew Hurley collected fictions put out by Penguin Classics. This is the Penguin Classics Deluxe edition with the I don't know if you can see, but it has those fabulous deckled edges and the French flaps that I love so much. So it's just it's a beautiful book in and of itself. Just the design, I really love it. And I'm reading this one for the Classics and Company pick for May, or for April and May, or April through mid-May. And if you're not familiar with Classics and Company, it is a year-long reading event taking place in 2023, this year, hosted by myself and Anne Novella, where we are taking 8 works of sort of canonical fiction classics, and we are reading them over the course of the year. And so our current pick is Borges, and it's a very casual, very relaxed reading event. We are not really putting out dedicated videos for it. We do have a dedicated Discord server where we are having conversations and discussions back and forth about what we are currently reading, and there will be a link to that in the description down below. If that is something that sounds interesting to you, we would absolutely love to have you join us. It is very relaxed, very low-key, very informal. You can join us for all of the readings. You can join us for none of the readings, or for partial readings if you just want to stop in to read the conversations or to engage in the conversations if you've already read the book in the past. It is very low-key, very relaxed, and it's just a really great time. So that is the current pick for Classics and Company, and we're taking our time in this. I'm just reading a couple stories a week, actually, at this point. I should be doing a couple a day, but I've pulled back to just reading a handful a week and sort of filling in the gaps. Some of them are a little bit shorter, so they're a little bit quicker to read. So this one will be going up through May 15th. So this will be a staple in my week reading updates for a little bit longer. Then moving on to my reading plans moving into next week. Really, I'm not going to add any other books, at least at this point, just because I have a decent amount of material already here to get through next week. So what I will be reading is the Seamus Heaney translation of Beowulf. This isn't too terribly long, so I'm hoping that maybe it could be a single sitting read. If not a single sitting, I would most definitely think that I could get it done in 2 sittings. So I will be having this one in next week. Continuing on with Post Captain, I went ahead and got the audiobook from my local library of this book. So I will be listening and reading it. So with the fact that I'm 50% through today, hopefully that means I can finish it by maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, which will be fantastic. And then I will have the Nelson biography, Nelson, Love and War, going for the rest of this week, and then probably into next week as well. And then Borges will follow me into next week. So that is it for my reading update. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave a comment down below if you would like, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now, and happy reading.